here. Mohamed Salah. Mohamed Salah. Mo Salah. Is he going to be ruled out of AFCON? So recently, what happened is he had a hamstring injury. He had a hamstring injury, and Liverpool actually just published this post just a few hours before this stream. So we're going to go ahead and go through it together. We're going to see what it says. We're going to read between the lines. I'm going to give you my input as a physio, and we'll take it from there. So let's get to it. Mohamed Salah to return to Liverpool from AFCON for treatment on injury. The Egyptian Football Association has confirmed Mohamed Salah will return to Liverpool from the Africa Cup of Nations to receive treatment on his muscle injury. Let's zoom in and learn even more. The forward sustained this injury on Thursday during the first half of his nation's group stage fixture against Ghana. A subsequent update was issued stating he is expected to miss Egypt's next two matches if they progress to the knockout rounds of the tournament in the Ivory Coast. Salah will travel back to Merseyside after the Pharaohs Group B finale versus Cape Verde on Monday night. The Egyptian FA said in a statement on Sunday, after additional examinations were conducted on Mohamed Salah during the last few hours, and after communication between the national team's medical staff and his counterpart at Liverpool FC, it was decided the player will return to England after the Cape Verde match tomorrow to complete his treatment with the hope, and this is important, with the hope that he will join the national team in the semifinal of the AFCON if we qualify. Well, what exactly is going on here? What is going on here? Well, we actually can deduce a few things from the injury to the statement by Liverpool FC. We know three things. Not for sure, not for certain, but we can kind of read between the lines and decide three things. One, we know the timeline of the injury. We also can kind of determine the severity. Not with a lot of precision, but we can kind of determine the severity. And we can kind of determine where in the muscle the actual injury is. The timeline is a fact. Well, not exactly a fact. The timeline is clear and obvious to the reader. The severity and the location of injury, a little bit you got to read between the lines for, but we can conclude that the timeline for this injury is just about 3 weeks. And why is that? Well, the whole goal for Mohamed Salah is to potentially return for the semifinal of the AFCON from the Cup of Nations. And the semifinals, February 7th. February 7th, I believe, is a Thursday. The date of injury, January 17th, if I'm doing my math correctly, which means there's about 3 weeks. There is about 3 weeks from the date of injury to his potential return to AFCON. Well, how can we say, okay, we have that timeline there, but how do we know the severity? Well, there is a muscle injury grading system, and there are several versions of this grading system, which we're not going to get into on this stream here. But generally, we have different grades of muscle injury. Grade 1 being a small percentage of the muscle fibers being teared. Grade 2 meaning a larger proportion, up to maybe 50% of the fibers being torn. And grade 3 meaning more than 50, potentially up to 100% of the muscle fibers being torn. Well, how does that relate to hamstring injury? Typically, and there is a lot of overlap, but typically a grade 1 hamstring injury is about 2 to 3 weeks. A grade 1 hamstring injury is about 2 to 3 weeks. There is variability within that, but generally about 2 to 3 weeks. Typically, for a grade 2 hamstring injury, it's about 3 to 4 weeks. Again, variability within that. There's always variability. It can always be less than 3. It can always be more than 4. But typically, it's about 3 to 4 weeks. Now, that being said, if the whole goal is to return to AFCON, a very important competition, it's a continental FIFA competition. So, if the timeline is set out for 3 weeks, you're looking at a grade 1 injury or maybe a more minor grade 2 injury. And with that, we know that a smaller percentage of the muscle fibers are torn, likely less than 50%. And we can also and I'm going to go ahead and show you guys this here. Let's move off of this foot here. Let's turn the pen off. Let's reset everything here. Let's zoom out. Let's turn on our muscles. Zoom in, zoom out. Okay, so did y'all know that the hamstrings actually have 3 muscles? Did you guys know that the hamstrings have 3 muscles? I didn't know that before PT school. But the hamstrings actually have 3 muscles. There are 3 muscles. Let's go ahead and outline them here because this also has an effect on how long this injury rehab will be. The hamstring is actually 3 muscles. One is the biceps femoris. This guy right here. It actually has 2 heads. We're not going to get into that. But this is one of the 3 muscles. It's on the outside of your leg. The other 2 are on the inside. We got this guy right here, the semitendinosus, and this guy right here, the semimembranosus. Did you guys know that this muscle on the outside here has a quicker return to injury than the 2 on the inside here? These injuries on the inside will take longer to heal generally than this guy out here. So that's a clue. That's a clue because if he's going to fully recover from this injury within just 3 weeks and return to full fitness, being a continental competition, it's probably this guy right here, the biceps femoris, which is also way more common in general for soccer injuries to have an injury on. The reason for that, nobody really knows. Maybe it's because it has 2 nerve innervations, yada, yada, yada. We're not going to get into that on this stream here, but it's a lot more common for players to injure this muscle. So it's probably in this muscle. And not only that, because of the fact that the injury has a timeline of 3 weeks to complete recovery, if we are looking at a complete recovery, because we could be looking at a scenario where the injury is actually a lot more severe and Mohamed Salah is going to return without being fully recovered. But that's a possibility we're not going to get into on this stream here. But we also know that hamstring injuries that happen in the middle of the muscle, let's get my pen out here. Hamstring injuries that happen in the middle of the muscle, kind of right there in the middle of the muscle, these injuries heal quicker than injuries that happen higher up or lower down within the muscle. Why? Because you see all of this red here. Muscle is red because 1, that's the color of the tissue, but 2, it has a really good blood supply. But if you look towards the top here, where I'm kind of circling here, you see how that's all white? That's a tendon. That tendon does not have a good blood supply, and it's the same at the bottom here. Those areas of the muscle do not have a good blood supply, and because of that, they take longer to heal. And because of that, we can kind of conclude that that injury is probably in the middle of the muscle belly. It's likely on the biceps femoris because that injury is a lot more common in soccer players. About 80% of injuries in the hamstring happen in the biceps femoris. 2, injuries on the inner hamstring take longer to heal. And because we have only about 3 weeks, we know that the injury is likely on the more mild side. And 3, we know the muscle injury is probably in the middle, right on top of that juicy muscle that has a lot of good blood supply that allows it to heal relatively quickly. So you can see, guys, when you read an article, you can kind of piece through the lines and read between the lines and kind of get an insight as to exactly what's going on. Now, why did Mohamed Salah leave Liverpool? Why did he leave Egypt and go back to Liverpool if the whole goal is to return back to the Egyptian national team? Well, it's because it's in everybody's best interest. It is in everybody's best interest for Mohamed Salah to do just that. Well, why? I've never worked at AFCON. I've never worked at Copa America. I've never worked at Gold Cup, but I have worked in a football environment where you're in a tournament. And when you're in a tournament environment, the only thing that is important is getting through each day to the next match and winning. Your entire schedule as a player, as a manager, as a physio, as a fitness coach is revolved around the team schedule. Your treatments are revolved around the team schedule. Your practice, everything, completely everything. Which means Mohamed Salah, as important as he is to the Egyptian national team, depending on the amount of staffing that the Egyptian FA has over there, they probably travel with maybe 3, 4, possibly even 5 physios. Mohamed Salah is going to need individual treatment. The treatment of Mohamed Salah cannot be impacted by the scheduling of the Egyptian national team, which means that whoever's working with Mohamed Salah has to focus on just Mohamed Salah, which means that they're not helping the rest of the team. And if the team loses, there's no team for Mohamed Salah to return to because we're talking about a knockout competition here. If Mohamed Salah returns to Liverpool, I don't know how many physios I have on staff, but I would be surprised if it's anywhere less than 6 to 7. Mohamed Salah can really be prioritized there, and they can focus just on him. He can have a physio say, I don't need to do anything else. I'm only focused on Mohamed Salah. Liverpool can justify it because he's one of their best players, and it is important for him as well as Egypt to return to 100%. So that's probably why Mohamed Salah went back to Liverpool, is because the Egyptian FA and their staff can focus strictly on AFCON. Mohamed Salah can get the best treatment possible in an environment. That's the other thing. Who knows what kind of facilities the Egyptian FA have access to? Who knows? What kind of gym do they have? What kind of treatment modalities do they have? What kind of doctors do they have access to? Did the Egyptian doctor travel with them? These are all the things we don't know. But what we do know is that Mohamed Salah has everything he needs at Liverpool. So I'm not too surprised that he actually went back to Liverpool to finish his rehab, to finish his treatment. And should he need to return to Egypt, it's probably 7-hour flight to go back. So that's no problem for Mohamed Salah.